Hello there, good morning and a very warm welcome to our webinar today all about the minimum wage check in Sage 50 Payroll. My name's Duncan, I'm your host and presenter, and I am joined today by my colleague Alice, who's standing by in the background ready and waiting to answer your questions. Let's now take a look at what we'll cover in the webinar. So I'll begin with a brief introduction to national minimum and living wage legislation, which will include the current and upcoming national minimum wage rates. We're then going to take a look at the minimum wage check in Sage 50 Payroll, which you can use to check that your hourly paid employees are being paid above the relevant minimum wage. And we'll show how to set this up in terms of pay element settings and also applying that check to the relevant employees. We'll then move on to a demo on processing minimum wage with the minimum wage check, and I'll show you how you can automatically adjust rates for employees being paid below the minimum wage. And once we've been through those demos, we've got a short quiz at the end to test your newfound knowledge. So 4 questions, multiple choice that you can join in with at the end, just for fun. So that's what we've got lined up for you. Let's get things underway with a little bit on national minimum and living wage legislation. So what is the difference between minimum and living wage? Well, it's essentially just what it's being called by the government. The national minimum wage is the minimum pay per hour that employees are entitled to receive. And the national living wage is slightly higher than the national minimum wage, and it applies to employees who are aged 21 or older. And for the rest of the webinar, I will tend to say minimum wage, but that of course means minimum or living wage. So let's take a look at these minimum hourly rates. So I've got the current rates on the slide here and also the upcoming rates, which will take effect from the 1st of April. So currently, for employees aged 21 and over, the minimum hourly pay is £11.44 per hour. That's the national living wage. And then minimum wage for 18 to 20s is £8.60 per hour. And for under 18s and apprentices, it is currently £6.40 per hour. Now, the apprentice rate does apply to apprentices who are under 19 or who are in their first year of apprenticeship. If they're over 19 and they're in their second year of apprenticeship, the minimum wage for their particular age will apply. Now, I've put a couple of links on this slide, which will take you to more information about the legislation on both the gov.uk and ACAS website, and you'll be able to check those links if you download the handout. Now, what I also want to show you is where you can check the minimum wage rates within your program. So if I just bring these slides down, I am currently logged into Sage 50 Payroll. And you'll be able to check minimum wage rates by going to the company tasks here on the left-hand side. And then if you open up the legislation settings, you click legislation here on the left-hand side, you will see there is a tab for minimum wage. And it's quite a handy place for you to remind yourself what the rates are. So as you can see, we've got our 21 and older rate of £11.44, got £8.60 for 18 to 20s, £6.40 for 16 and 17-year-olds, and that is the same as the apprenticeship rate. So it's these rates held within the legislation settings that's checked when you use the minimum wage check feature. But useful to know where you can check this if you've got your program open. So that's all I'm going to say on the kind of legislation side. But what I do want to focus on in the webinar today is the feature in Sage 50 Payroll, enabling you to check that your employees are paid at least the minimum or living wage. One thing just to be clear at this point is that this only works for hourly paid employees. If you pay your employees a fixed salary, you will need to do a manual calculation to check that their hourly rate is above the relevant minimum. But if they are paid hourly, that can then be checked by the software, and we'll show you how that all works in these next demos. So first thing we're going to take a look at is the pay element settings. So for each payment type, you need to define whether that payment should be included in the minimum wage check calculation and whether that payment represents hours worked. So it'll be the total of the payments that are flagged for minimum wage check that'll be used in the calculation, kind of divided by the payments that record hours. You would then need to enable or apply the minimum wage check within the employee record. So that can either be done on an individual basis or it can be done using global changes. So pretty simple to set up, but let me walk you through the steps right now. Now, first thing I'm going to do is to check my pay element settings. So starting from the company tasks, I'm going to click on to pay elements. Now for today's demo, I just have the 4 payments set up. My first one is for basic pay for hourly paid employees. And if I click onto edit, the settings I'm focusing on here are to include the value in the minimum wage calculation, and in this case to also include the hours in the minimum wage calculation. So I've got both of these boxes ticked because this is an hourly rate payment and I need to include it in the check. Next payment in my list is for overtime, and this overtime payment includes a premium element because it's being paid at time and a half compared to the usual hourly rate. Now, under minimum wage legislation, premium elements are not included in earnings when checking the minimum wage. So if you do have overtime rates that are calculated in this way, you would need to set them up as factored payments. So this is a factored payment that calculates the rate at 1.5 times the base payment rate, which is the basic pay. And for this one, we're including the value and the hours, but we are also indicating that it includes a premium element. So that way, when it does the calculation, it'll disregard the extra amount, so the and a half in this example, when working out if an employee is being paid minimum wage. Third payment here is commission payments. So for this one, I'm still going to include it in the calculation. So I've got the value included in minimum wage calculations, but this one doesn't represent hours worked. So this is in addition to their hourly pay. So we're not going to include the hours or number in the calculation. We're just going to take the total value into account. So that's why only the first box is ticked. And then this last payment, I have set up specifically for cases where I want to top up an employee's pay so that it meets minimum wage, but without kind of using basic or commission as the topped up payment. So I want to show it as a separate line. So I'm just concluding the value in the minimum wage calculation, but again, this won't represent an hour worked. And you'll see how this works a little bit later on in the demo. So that's where you can check your pay element settings. A quick tip, if you want to check all of the settings at the same time, you can run the payment types report. So to find that, click on the reports option above your employee list. If you go to the company folder on the left-hand side, you're looking for the one called payment types, which I've added to my favorites. And this lists all of the pay elements that you've set up, or the payments that you've set up. And you can very quickly check the minimum wage settings. So which ones are included for hours, which ones included for the value, and which of these include a premium element. So that's another way that I could check my pay element settings. So the second step of the setup is to enable the check for the relevant employees. So there are 2 ways you can do this. First of all, you can do it directly in the employee record. So if I just open the record for my first employee, go onto the employment tab, and then down here, I'm going to click pay elements. You'll see I've got the employee's default hours and rate stored here, and I can tick the box to apply the minimum and living wage check. So that will now check the employee's pay in the enter payment screen. The other way I could do it, if I don't want to go through individually tick in that box is I can use global changes. So if I select my other hourly paid employees 2 through to 5, if I want to apply the check to them using global changes, I would go to the tasks menu, global changes. I would then go to payments. And from here, I can set the apply minimum living wage flag. So that's going to do it for the 4 selected employees. I'm going to click yes to continue. And that has now ticked the relevant setting for those employees as well. Now, once you've enabled the check for the employees, they will appear on the minimum wage employees report. So this is a good way to check who's been set up for this option. So I've got everyone selected. I'll go back into the main reports option. Now again, I've got this one added to my favorite minimum wage employees report, but you'll find it in the employee folder. So it's just this one here, minimum wage employees report. And for anyone where you've set up the minimum wage check, it's going to display their details. You can see the date of birth and age, and you can see which minimum wage band will apply to them. So actually, it looks like all of my staff are 21 and older, but I do have one who is set up as an apprentice. So I'll show you where that's set up a little bit later on in the demo. So that was our setup process. We've configured our pay elements and we've chosen which of them are included in the check and which of them are hourly payments. And then we've applied the minimum or living wage check either in the employee record or by using global changes. So what I can now do at the point I process my pay is I can have the system check whether they're being paid above the relevant minimum wage for their age. And I will see a prompt if I'm not paying them the minimum wage, asking if I want to adjust any of their variable payments. Now, if you've set your pay elements up to be fixed payments, where the rates are fixed within the employee records, you'll still see a prompt telling you if they're being paid below the minimum wage, but you wouldn't be able to make any adjustments. The adjustments can only be made automatically for variable payments. So this is the message that would pop up if employees are paid below the minimum wage. If you do have variable payments, you can choose which of those you would like to adjust. And that's why I've set up a separate payment line for one of my examples, because I do want to show any top up separately on the payslip. It's just a choice I've made. And the default rates that are stored in the employee record can be updated if it's a permanent sort of increase, if they've changed age within the pay element settings. So I've engineered a few scenarios here that I'm going to take you through as we run through the minimum wage check. So if I return to my payroll tasks, I've just set my next process date, which is going to be tomorrow, Friday the 14th. I'm going to work with one employee at a time. So we're going to start with this first employee. I've called it regular employee because they're over 21, so they're entitled to national living wage, £11.44. And their current rates of pay is exactly what that is. So although it's going to check, I'm not expecting to see any alerts to say that they're being paid below the minimum. So if I go into the enter payment screen, these are the hours they've worked and the hourly rate this week. If I click save/next, you can see everything's good. And that would move me on to the next employee if I had selected more than one. If for some reason the rate was lower, so let's just knock this down to £11 per hour, and I click onto save/next, that's when I see the alert. It's asking me what payment I might want to adjust. So basic is set up as a variable payment. So I could click adjust and that would put the rate back to the minimum wage. I'm just going to cancel out. I'm going to manually enter it because I want that value to be retained next time I pay them. So pretty straightforward with that one. They're being paid below the minimum wage. I'll get the prompt. Now, for the next employee, this one is also over 21, but we're going to introduce some overtime into the calculation. So let's go into the enter payment screen, and you can see that the employee has done 40 hours, and I'm paying them £11 per hour for their basic. They've done 10 hours of overtime. That's at time and a half, so that's at £16.50 per hour. Now, at first glance, if we take a look at the number of hours worked, they've worked 50 hours altogether. Their total gross pay for the week is £605. So if I put that in a calculator, 605 divided by 50, it looks like they are being paid above the minimum wage, because that would be an average hourly wage of £12.10. But of course, the overtime includes a premium element. So some of this pay isn't included in the calculation. And as such, when I try to save these payments, I am still prompted that they're being paid less than the minimum wage. And it's asking me which payment I wish to adjust. So the only variable payment here is basic. And if I click adjust, you can see that it has changed the hourly rate to £11.44. And the overtime rate has increased accordingly. But this now verifies that they are being paid their minimum wage. So what I would need to do really for this employee is set their default hourly rate for basic. So I can do that by going into the employee record. From the employment tab, I can go into pay elements. I can make that change here, so that I've now got the default set at the correct hourly rate. On to employee 3, this is an interesting one. So this employee has recently turned 21. In fact, today is their 21st birthday. That would move them up, you would think, to the next minimum wage band. But under the legislation, the change only needs to take effect in the first full pay reference period after their birthday. So at the moment, we have a pay period where some of the time was before their 21st birthday and some of it was after. And it does mean that we won't necessarily be told we need to increase the rate at this stage, because this isn't the first full pay reference period since they were 21. What I do need to do is change their NI category, because as per the pay date, they are over 20. So I need to move them off category M and onto category A. So I've made that change there. But when I go into the enter payment screen, their current hourly rate is the 18 to 20 rate, £8.60. And when I click on to save next, you can see it is not at this stage telling me I need to increase the rate. Now, I could choose to increase the rate at this point if I wanted to, but when I do next week's payroll, that is the point at which we will see that prompt. And it's because this pay reference period is kind of split between them being under 21 and 21. A couple of others just to show you. The next employee is commission based, so they get an hourly rate plus commission, which we expect them to earn each period. So I'm going into the enter payment screen, and at the moment we've got 40 hours at a basic rate of £10 per hour, and this week their commission is £100. So if I bring up my trusty calculator, we know that's £500 in total, and they have worked 40 hours. So that's coming up at £12.50 per hour as the average hourly rate. And if I click onto save/next, you can see everything's fine. Don't need to make any adjustments. But let's say they earned less commission this month. So say it was £50. If I try and save these payments, at this point, I am being asked if I want to adjust payment. So it's asking, do I want to adjust basic or commission? And actually, I don't want to adjust either of these in this case. What I want to do instead is I want a third payment line. So I'm going to add a payment just to show that I'm topping up their basic and commission. So I've got 1 hour entered, but no rate for the top up. And when I click on Save/Next, this time I am going to choose that payment line. And you can see it's added an extra £7.60 so that the employee is being paid above minimum wage. So just to show you that calculation, total gross pay is now £457.60. If I divide that by the 40 hours they've worked, that's our £11.44 per hour. Last one just to show you in this demo is an apprentice. So with apprentices, they get paid at least the apprentice rate in their first year of apprenticeship, or if they're under 19. If they're over 19 and they're in their second year of apprenticeship or later, they need to be paid the relevant minimum wage for their age. So this employee is 23 years old. But if I go onto the employment tab and into the apprentice section, you can see that we do have apprenticeship dates entered. So it started nearly a year ago, 19th of February, 2024. So they're currently in their first year of apprenticeship, which means they can be paid the apprentice rate as their minimum wage. So when I go into enter payments, got 40 hours entered, £6.40 an hour. If I click Save/Next, that's absolutely fine because we've got the apprentice details entered. So that's how it all works, and I am going to update the records for this period. And as you saw, it did include some adjustments that I made to the employee's pay. When I set my date to my next pay date, which will be next Friday, if I go back into enter payments, so we've got the correct rate here. For my second employee, can you see that it has reverted back to what was originally entered within the enter payment screen? So if you click the option to make an adjustment, it'll make the adjustment for the current period, but when you do your next pay run, the value in enter payments will revert back to what it was originally. So what I need to do for this employee, it's going to trigger it again because they are still being paid below the minimum wage. But rather than adjusting it automatically this time, I'm just going to change it to £11.44. And that now matches the default hourly rate that I've got stored in their record. The employee whose birthday was last week, we're now into the first full pay reference period that they've been 21. So I am being prompted to adjust their basic pay. So it's gone up to £11.44. And again, I might want to set the default rate here in the employee record so that we've updated the default. Employee on commission, let's change these values slightly. Give them £75 commission this week, sorry. You can see that was above the minimum wage. And then for my apprentice, they're now into their second year of apprenticeship. So at this point, we do need to pay them minimum wage for their age. And they're over 21. So that again will be £11.44. So I could just adjust every time I see that prompt. But what I probably need to do in this case, again, is check the pay element settings and pop the new rate in. I could also enter that in the enter payment screen rather than getting it adjusted. So yeah, that's how it works. So just a few points to recap. The message will appear for employees where you've applied the minimum wage check and they're being paid below minimum wage for their age. You are prompted if you want to adjust a payment, if they are variable payments. If you set your pay element up to be a fixed payment, where rates are fixed in the employee record, you'll just see the prompt and you'll need to make the change in the employee record. And default rates can be updated in that location, as you saw a few times in the demo there. That is about it for the demonstration side. I have included in your handout some useful links. So all of the step-by-step on setting up and using the minimum wage check can be found in our knowledge base. I've also put some really useful links on the gov.uk website and ACAS. So that gives you some of the detail around the legislation and kind of special circumstances. So some quite handy links to refer to there. But as promised, we are going to end the webinar today with a quick knowledge check for you. So I've got a little quiz that we're going to run on screen using the polling feature. So if you want to join in, all you will need to do is to select what you think is the right answer to each question and click submit. We'll have a look at the overall results of the poll to see what you thought, and then I will let you know whether you were right or not. So first of 4 questions coming up now on your screen. And this one is, at what age does an employee get the national living wage? So what age does an employee get the national living wage? Is that age 18? Is it when they're 21? Is it when they turn 23? Or is it from the age of 25? So how old do you need to be to get national living wage? 18, 21, 23, or 25? Okay, so we've had some results in there. I'm just going to close that question down. And let's see whether you were right. So it looks like the majority of you, 85%, are saying 21 is the age you need to be for national living wage, and 11% are saying 18. So the correct answer there is 21. That did come down from 23, as it had been in previous years. And originally it was 25 to get the national minimum living wage. So the living wage is now payable from age 21. National minimum wage rates still apply to those 18 to 20 and under 18, but they are slightly lower rates. So well done if you got that one right. Next question. You'll have seen this lots in the demo today, but what's the current, as of February 2025, what's the current national living wage? Is that £8.60? Is it £10.42? Is it £11.44? Or is it £12.50? So what's the rate of pay for the national living wage? So some good answers coming through on this one. And we'll close that question down. And I'll share the results. And happy to see that 99% of you have said £11.44, which is the current national living wage. The other answers on there, £8.60 is the minimum wage for employees 18 to 20. £10.42 was living wage last year. £12.50 is just a higher hourly rate. I think it's going up to £12.21 from April 2025. So well done to most of you that got that right. Question 3. Where can you find the current minimum or living wage rates in Sage 50 Payroll? So if you need a reminder of what the minimum wage rates are, where can you find that information in Sage 50 Payroll? Could you find it within Enter Payments? Would you find it in the employee record within Pay Elements? Is it in Company and Pay Elements? Or can you find that information in Company and Legislation? So where can you find the current minimum and living wage rates in Sage 50 Payroll. Great, I'm closing that one down now. Just sharing the results. So 92% of you think it's in company and legislation, 5% company pay elements, 1% for the other areas. So 92% of you were correct. You'd find it on the minimum wage tab within company and legislation. It shows all of the current rates. And then as you move into the new tax year, it'll show you the updated rates within company legislation once you've installed the year-end update. Company pay elements, you might see them there if you've set your defaults to be the minimum rates. But if you need to check what the correct ones are, it's company then legislation. And last question here. What type of payment can be automatically adjusted by the minimum wage check feature? So what type of payment can be automatically adjusted? Is that variable payments, fixed payments, global payments, or factored payments? All vote now. Okay, last few seconds on that one. Just going to close that down. And if I share those results, most popular answer for that one is variable payment with 73%. Some of you thought factored and 10% are saying fixed. Correct answer there is variable. So that's the pay rate that would be automatically adjusted by the minimum wage check feature. If you also have factored payments, those rates would change accordingly if the base payment was adjusted. Fixed payments can't be adjusted automatically, but you'll still see the message telling you when employees are paid below the minimum wage, you would then need to go in and change the rates in the employee record. So correct answer there was variable. And that was the last of our quiz questions. Well done to those that got 4 out of 4. And that brings us nicely to the end of the webinar. So we do have some time remaining. If you do have questions that you'd like to ask us, please do submit that in the chat, or the Q&A, I should say, and we'll get some answers out to you. I do want to quickly run through some of the further support that we have available for you guys. We do have upcoming webinars this month. So the next one on Tuesday of next week is an introduction to payrolling benefits. We have our Get Your Payroll Done month-end session on Wednesday, and we have a repeat of our Sage HR showcase around the timesheets module in Sage HR on Thursday, the 20th at 2 p.m. Payroll year end is just around the corner, and we do have sessions coming up starting from the 25th of February, year end part 1, talking about installing your update and preparing for year end, and then processing year end starting from the 10th of March. Loads of different dates and times available for those sessions, and we also have some additional webinars taking place in March and April. You can get all the details by visiting our website at sage.co.uk/webinars. Just follow the links for Sage 50 Payroll. Further support can also be found on our help centre at sage.co.uk/help, or you can click any help icon that you see within your payroll software, and that'll take you to the same content. Our help centre includes support guides, there's a link to the webinars upcoming, there's videos in some of our articles, and if you do need to contact the support team, just visit the help centre and choose the topic you need help with, and then you will find a get in touch link with all of our contact details. One other resource just to mention is Sage University. You can access our e-learning certification and bite-sized learning courses at sageu.com, completely free to complete your profile and get set up for this option, and then you'll find your courses if you navigate to Sage 50 Payroll. So We are just going to use the rest of the time to answer any remaining questions. Before you leave us today, if you'd like a copy of the handouts, don't forget to download them from the piece of paper icon. If you want to keep any Q&A, you need to copy and paste it into another document. You will receive a recording of the webinar, which will be linked to from your follow-up email, which we'll send later on today. And when you exit the webinar, I'd invite you to take our webinar survey. So if you have any thoughts on today's session or any ideas for other topics that you would like to see, please do spend a moment to complete that survey. We do read all of your comments, and we use that to improve our webinars moving forward. With that said, I'm going to go on to mute just to check on any remaining questions, but I will come back to say goodbye when we're ready to wrap things up. So I'll speak to you shortly. Hi again, everyone, and thank you so much for sending the questions through. I think we've managed to get most of the answers out. Alice is just sending the last one out just now. So I hope that's been useful. I just want to take this opportunity. Thank you for your time this morning. If you wouldn't mind completing our survey when you leave us today, very much appreciate any of your feedback. Do look out for that follow-up email, which will arrive later today. It has a link to the recording in it. And you're very welcome to join us at any of our future webinars, which you can sign up to at sage.co.uk/webinars. But for now, on behalf of myself and Alice, thanks so much for joining us at the webinar, and we look forward to seeing you on another session in the future. It's goodbye for now.